When I was a kid, I was very intrigued by the toy called Spirograph, and I loved making those cool epicycloidal patterns using the gears and whatnot. Even in fact, even in high school, I was like a part of the math team, and I wrote a little article on how Spirograph, how you could predict what kind of pattern you would get from Spirograph, knowing how many teeth each gear had, right? Real nerdy type stuff. And anyway, any of these things that create those sort of patterns in geometry always really intrigue me. And I have a good friend, Dean. He's a mathematician. He told me about this toy he had as a kid. He's about 8 years older than me. It was called Hootenanny. I'm not sure, he might have inherited it from his parents or an older relative. And I did a video on this. I won't go into it exactly, but again, it's sort of a variation on Spirograph, and you can make some cool patterns with it. I took it out after having not used it in a while, and I was just looking at some of the really cool patterns I made with the Hootenanny. Look at that. That is just cool. And it doesn't work exactly like Spirograph. It uses linkages and things like that. And it's really cool. So anyway, I'm on Banggood sometimes, and Banggood sends me, things you might be interested in, and all of a sudden I see this thing. Now you can see it's got a real little kid on the cover. It seems to be for ages 8 and up, and it looks like yet another variation on something like a Hootenanny or a Spirograph, but this one looks like it has motors and gears, and it actually has a battery. I really prefer the old hand crank, or using your body, because then it requires a little bit of skill too. To use Hootenanny or Spirograph does require a little bit of skill. But anyway, this thing I think was 14 bucks. I couldn't really resist it. Got damaged a little in shipping. I haven't opened it up yet, so let me see if this thing is going to be any good, and we'll see if it's fun. So I just opened up the box, and I mean, there's actually a lot of gears in here. Kind of more involved than I thought it was going to be. These are the kinds of things, incidentally, where I have no idea how these companies can make these products and sell them for like $10, $12. I think this was $14. That was actually a little on the expensive side. But got all these gears, and it comes with, I can see there's a little bit of a motor in there, little two AA battery pack thing. Got some linkages. Then it's got this little bag of springs. So I don't know if honestly, my first thought is maybe the little kid can play with this thing. I'm not sure he's going to be able to put it together, but that is a pretty little kid. I'm trying to think when I was that old, if I could have put this thing together. I don't know. But anyway, come with a little manual. I don't know if I will videotape putting this thing together. Maybe I'll take a few still pictures and just sort of show it. But anyway, it looks kind of cool. I'm already, if this thing works on any level that's half decent, I'm already happy with it. It's pretty complicated. All right, let's see how it comes together. All right, I just completed the little machine here, and I have to say, it looks pretty good to me, and I have literally not tried this. This is not doctored in any way. We're going to try it for the first time right now. Not only is it kind of mechanically interesting, and it has a lot of gears and linkages and stuff like that, which is cool, it actually also has a little electronics. So those little springs I was showing before, I didn't realize they're just to make the electrical connections between the battery, the switch, and the motor. But if you're an 8-year-old kid, not only do you get to build this fairly cool thing, but you also get a little electronics education. You now know how to hook a motor up to a switch and a set of batteries. It's kind of cool. Anyway, let's try this. Here is a pink Sharpie. According to the instructions, you're supposed to kind of pick this up. This is spring loaded. Kind of pick this up, put this in, and let it bottom out. So I'm not sure how to do this with one hand. This might mark the paper, but let's just bring it down like that. It's bottomed out, and now we're going to turn it on and see what happens. Well, I'm going to shut her down right there. I didn't realize how tight a pattern that was going to be. So maybe a Sharpie was a bad choice. Also, that you notice that thing was struggling a bit. The motor did seem to be struggling a bit at certain times. Now, this piece of paper is kind of stuck in there. Well, unfortunately, there's not much to see. I haven't really looked at the mathematics behind this drawing tool yet, so I'm not sure how changing these various holes will affect the pattern. So we'll have to experiment with it, maybe sit down and actually figure out the mathematical sort of analysis of it, or possibly let my friend Dean, who's a mathematician and is better at this than I am, maybe he can figure it out. Anyway, I'm going to do some more experimentation, maybe switch from a Sharpie to like a regular pen and see how that works. Okay, let me try to explain sort of how this machine works a little bit, and I'm hoping my explanation is correct. All of these gray gears are basically just a way of increasing the gear ratio or decreasing the RPM to give this more torque and eventually drive these two blue gears. The two blue gears are really what's controlling everything. Now, just for example, I'll just give you an example. Let's say this big gear had 100 teeth and this little gear had 25 teeth. Now 25 goes into 100 evenly. So when this makes one rotation, this will have made completely 4 rotations, and the pattern would start over again, okay? Because 25 goes into 100 evenly, the pattern's going to restart every time this does 4 revolutions. Now let's just say, for argument's sake, this big blue gear had 150 teeth and this one had 20 teeth. Now here's the situation. 20 teeth does not go evenly into 150. 20 does not divide into 150. However, it does go into 300. So the big gear would have to make 2 rotations. That would be the equivalent of 150 times 2. That would be 300 teeth. And since this has 20 teeth on it, it would have to make 15 rotations to do 300 teeth. So that situation would result in the pattern being repeated every time the big gear makes 2 rotations and this one makes 15. So what kind of drives this is the least common multiple between the number of teeth that these 2 gears have. So that's what it's called in math, the least common multiple. That is to say, a number which both these 2 number of teeth go into evenly. So I counted very carefully these teeth, and I came up with the big gear has 94 teeth, the smaller gear has 49 teeth. And if you're wondering what the least common multiple is between these 2 numbers, one way you can do it is you prime factor them, and then you pull off all the prime factors you need to create both numbers. And if you do that, it turns out you need all of them. So it turns out the least common multiple between these 2 numbers is in fact the multiplication of the 2. Now I'm not sure if the makers of this chose this for a reason, but in some ways it's good, in some ways it's bad. But what it means is the 94 tooth gear is going to have to rotate 49 times. The 49 tooth gear is going to have to rotate 94 times before the pattern resets and is complete. Now that's a lot of rotations. Now if you look at the way these numbers, sort of the multiples of them, it turns out, for example, if the 94 tooth gear rotates 12 times, that's 1128 teeth, you could call it. And if the 49 tooth gear rotated 23 times, that's 1127 teeth. That's almost the same number. So after the big gear rotates 12 times, the pattern is going to be incredibly close to being completed, but it'll be off by 1 tooth. That means the line is going to get incredibly close. So in some ways, the only way to complete one of these patterns is to let it go, so that the 94 tooth gear, this thing has to make 49 rotations, and what happens is the pen lines get incredibly close together. And I don't even think the one I'm showing right now was ever completed, because if you go back to sort of the start point, which looks to be right there, it looks like it still isn't quite complete. I have a feeling if I let this go until it really was complete, the lines would be so close together that it might just be too close. So maybe they would have been better off if they made the gear teeth slightly different. So maybe the pattern would would maybe get completed in maybe 12 rotations or something, or 20 rotations. It's asking a lot, resolution wise, in the thickness of your pen, to be able to go 49 rotations before the pattern is completed. But anyway, I do think this thing is pretty cool. As you can see, the mechanism is struggling. The mechanism is also very noisy. Okay, I'm going to bypass that 2 AA battery pack and use instead a 2S LiPo pack, which is about 7.2 volts or something like that, as opposed to 2 AA's is only 3 volts. So I'm going to also bypass the switch, so I'm just going to attach it. We'll see how this goes. Might be a little fast, but I do think this is what is needed. Well, I'm not really sure how long the motor can go at that kind of voltage, so I'm going to take it a little conservatively. I'll stop it here. Not bad. Not bad. Anyway, jury is still out on this product, but it is kind of cool. Okay, everybody, I've done quite a lot of experimenting with this machine, and I'm coming to a conclusion that I really, really like it. And I think if I were a 12, 11, 10-year-old kid, I would really, really like it a lot. Let me just show you a couple of cooler patterns I've made. I'm kind of getting the hang of how to use it. I'm going to give you all of my information that I've gotten from using it. Here's a pretty cool pattern. These are all done by just, this was one single, let's say, link position that creates these patterns. Of course, you can keep the piece of paper in the machine, change the link position, and do something else. So you could, for example, you could put that in the middle, and you could have that on the outside if you just position the links correctly. So anyway, let me just explain to you a couple of important things when you get the toy. First off, the mechanism was having tremendous struggle with just the 2 AA batteries, and you saw I had experimented with using a bigger battery pack, 2 LiPo cells, which are around 7.2 volts. That worked a lot better. It also works a lot faster. I personally think it's sort of cool watching the machine move slower, so you can kind of see how it works. However, the speed is nice. This thing takes a long time to make a pattern, so you could possibly change the voltage to something different. However, the key to making this machine work well is a little 3-in-1 oil. If you put a drop of 3-in-1 oil on all of these axles, not only does the machine run a lot smoother, I mean, the noise goes almost away, the motor doesn't struggle as much, and then the 2 AA batteries seem to work pretty well. Now, as far as actually using the machine goes, I'm going to show you right now the method that I think works best. First off, the pieces of paper that come with the machine actually are 10-sided. I don't know, I think I earlier said they were octagons, but they're actually 10-sided. And to put them in the little platter here, or little platen here, it is really best to remove these pins. Now, you're going to pick a position anyway, so these pins are going to come out. So you might as well just take them out. And now, if you'll notice, the little corners of this piece of paper do fit nicely in here. Now, this is where it takes a little patience to put this piece of paper in. I have found that with a little patience it's better if you can get those little corners to get underneath and fit in there perfectly. Okay, so I'm going to make sure they're in there before I start using the machine. So one of the places where the 10-year-old or 12-year-old kid might have a little issues is it does take a little patience to get those little corners of the 10-sided polygon to fit into those little holes. Now the little slits, it really does hold the paper very well if you do it properly, and unfortunately if you don't do it properly it slips, so there is kind of an issue. The next thing I think is really good is to grab a piece of scrap paper. Now I usually just grab any old kind of piece of scrap paper. I'll put it down like this. Now I'm going to use a regular pen. You can use colored pens, of course. Now this is just a regular Bic pen. It's actually working pretty well for me. And I'm going to now select my positions. I will select the inner hole here. I will select, I think if I select this pin, I think the pattern will be concentrated more in the center. So I'll select maybe this pin. So you put this in with the spring under it. Now the thing that I find is very beneficial is I use a bamboo skewer, but you can just find something that's about this thick. It's about 1/8 of an inch, and lift the spring up and just slide the bamboo skewer under there just to prop this arm up a little bit. Now with your scrap piece of paper underneath, you now have your hands free to put the pen in the little holder. You can push the pen all the way down till it bottoms out because you have your scrap piece of paper there. I am now going to lift this up, take the bamboo skewer out, remove my scrap paper, gently drop the pen down, and now I'll turn it on. Now I talked about the math of this before, and it seemed as though this gear might have to make 94 revolutions before the actual pattern comes to a complete closure. However, in 23 revolutions, it's extremely close to a closure, and I haven't been counting. So I'm more or less looking at the pattern. I'm going to stop it here. I'm going to lift it up. Now, we can now change positions. So, for example, maybe I'll change to an outer pin. Let's do some extreme changes here and see what it does. Maybe I'll go, maybe not quite all the way out, but we'll go pretty far out. I will put my piece of scrap paper back in. I will put my bamboo skewer underneath just to lift it up. I'll put my pen down. Yeah, once you know how to use this machine, it's pretty sweet. I'll put that down and we'll turn it back on. Now I'm going to give it a stop, I believe. So once again, like I tell you, the least common multiple between these two gears is very big number. So for it to really complete, it takes a long time. I think the lines might get too close together to the point where you might not even be able to really distinguish it. But let me pull this out and see how it looks. So there you can see, I mean, that is pretty darn good. I mean, let's face it. And of course I could have changed colors. So I could have had, that could have been one color, that could have been another color. So how do I feel about this toy? About $14. It came with everything you see here except for the 2 AA batteries. Any kid you're thinking of getting it, young boy or girl, could have a lot of fun with this toy. You've got a lot of mechanical stuff going on. You've got some electronics. I think this is a really cool toy. Now, do I like it more than my Hootenanny or my Spirograph? It's really hard to say. Um, Replacing hand cranking with a motor, I don't know. As an adult, I almost like the hand crank better, but as a kid, I think the motor might have been cooler. Anyway, yeah, I think it's definitely worth $14 for sure. I think kid could have a lot of fun with it, and I can see now that it really does have a lot of potential. You could get really good at using this thing. Just make sure you have a little 3-in-1 oil, though. It's important.